stopping, even hoomed.
But this was only the song I sought to sing, not what ultimately spilled.
Out of my lips, that sound was completely different.
For you see, in the peculiar forest of falling
notes, sounds could not hold
together.
Like pearls on a snip.
Silk thread, they
scattered wildly upon the ground.
It did not matter the sort of sound, either. Whether a melody, a whistle, or even nick-tick or...
Click-crick.
All of it fell apart. It was even in the falling apart of a breeze.
Though was there a breeze?
If I could still feel it on my face.
And in the falling apart of rustling needles.
And seed.
Though were there even these?
If I could still feel them under my feet.
Even the stream I drank from, though it curled with taste.
I could only hear, in the terrifying way, all the sound of all. The world there was...
constantly
severed.
Worse. What was initially curious and startling became more and...
more terrible. For I began to fear as the sound of my passage and even my own thoughts were disremattered, that I was with ever varied velocity going nowhere, that I had come from nowhere, that I was lost and soon too like the matter of my uncertain
breath would scatter among the turns of these.
Unspeakable wood.
Toph with frowns, Isay, Inadia,
and Sithis
with exchanged glances. It'll make it with a yawn. Reveal then that they too were lost in their attention.
Scattering.
But the
storyteller missed
nothing.
Ah, yes. How hard it is to imagine that forest falling.
Notes, I know.
And he lowered his head, dramatically,
causing the orphans to reflexively rock forward.
Imagine, he said pointedly, his eyes still lost in the
downward tumble of his pose.
Imagine every sound a sigh of but one thing,
dying instead of coming one after another.
Sigh.
A sigh of
all at once.
What would that sound like?
And the
storyteller raised his head to look at one of the windows.
And Chitana felt something within
her part,
like a whale,
butterfly, hope and hold. Not over the stabbing,
pain in her thumb,
either,
which had clearly gotten much, much worse,
but over a horror far more simple.
She knew the windows had all been closed.
She remembered it clearly by the way the candles burned, all five,
flames arrogantly vertical,
impervious. Now, though, the flames flickered wildly,
dancing on the edge
of annihilation as a shriek of wind,
freeze and sky
whirled around the room.
Somehow, one window was now
wide open.
Already the social worker had
leapt up to close it, puzzled,
confused, but clearly too drowsy to pay too much mind.
The storyteller
had the answer, but he only
looked at the
orphans with his own questions, which they responded to.
And in surprising unanimity,
with a question of their own. Then what happened? I left gladly the forest of falling
notes, only to find myself at the base of a precarious path, rising up through twisting leaps of snow and looming
boulders wrapped in pale wisps of always moving
cloud.
The mountain of many one.
Paths had only one path as far as I could tell. Here at least, my shadow
traveled with me, and the songs I whistled made sense.
In fact, the mountain seemed
just
a mountain.
Only when I began the dangerous ascent did I start
to proceed through the briefly parting veils of
pall and mist, another climber on what I admitted then had to be
a second path. Soon the figure was enveloped in white, never to be seen again. I had begun to forget the sighting when on a
completely different part of the mountain, below me this time, I momentarily caught
sight of another climber on a
third path.
This time, I moved down a little in his direction, only to watch a twisting sheet of white
widen from my sight. Nor was that the last time. On the contrary, it was the beginning.
Climbers began to
pop up all over the
mountain, always on a different
path, always swept away by mist before reappearing somewhere else.
Eventually, though, I managed to get a little closer before the pale wind
stole these solitary figures away. And it was then that I
could see how all of them looked
exactly the same.
And not just the same as one another, but the same as
me. And while to this day I cannot really tell you what took place on the mountain of many one paths. I
Understand still that in spite of so many climbing figures,
on so many paths, I was completely
Alone up there.
far worse than the
petrified shadows in the fallen notes,
the multiplication upon
multiplication of my own solitude.
Brought me repeatedly to the edge of despair, which is where
Quite sensibly, really, I finally found the man with no arms.
First there to greet me, though, was
the soft love of Osage orange and
A burnt hush surrounding me, softening me, and how sleepy my strange travels had made me. So I fell
into
a hammock hung between two black willows,
two black hills.
overlaying the edge of a pond where I slept for 3 days and 3 nights. And when at last I woke, I saw on the other side of that pond a small hut, the door wide open with smoke drifting up from a
Chimney somewhere off in the back.
upon entering, I found only
2 chairs at a tiny table supporting one large bowl of hot tea.
I sat and drank all the tea, and when I lowered the
Bowl, I discovered sitting opposite me the man with no arms. So startled by his presence,
The grayness of his presence, gray hair, gray whiskers.
gray eyebrows, grayer still his
wide eyes,
pupilless eyes,
all of him gray except for his
eyelashes, long willowy lashes rising out and up as
If they were falling away from the earth itself. Not gray at all, but a
luminous
violet. I jerked backwards, dropping the empty bowl with a
lingering
clatter.
And right then, the storyteller
teller also
jerked back, his 2 hands
pale as February,
Thrust out from underneath the silvery black tunic.
to ward off some wild apparition, his grin twisted into mock feast, startling the orphans into a laughter which,
in their own way,
Elicicated his own chilling.
laughed.
You have come a long way.
the man with
No arms.
said to me first. And I in vain
Trying to locate the fallen bowl,
could only nod.
You have come for one of my swords.
and again I nodded, though I had not known.
The weapons he made were swords. You know they are expensive. But your heart is black and prices you know as much as you know what price is.
Is no matter for you?
I said yes this time, and the
Man with
No.
arms laughed like a corkscrew. There were so many. Some so small they could barely reach halfway across one of your palms. Some, though, were wide as
a stair. Some wider.
than a road. Some curved like thunder. Some were straight like the sea's tides. Still others were thin like the breath of a June dew. And a few I saw waved like heat
Off an August noon.
But all, as far as I could tell, had the same
Type of blade. Milky white.
glossy and cold light.
A fog creeping low across a morning before.
A funeral.
In fact, so curious was I about their composition, I reached out to
Touch one, and if not for a sharp click and a wild
fluttering his violet eyelashes, I would have succeeded.
they cut every time, warned the man with no arms.
Every
Time.
Smartly, I withdrew.
Here, he blinked quickly at a blade, at least 4 feet long, tapering to a blunt tip. This one took me 3 winters to make.
It kills the taste of salt. The one next to it kills the smell of
Wild lupine, blackberry lily, and lush evening.
Primrose. There.
Turning to a fat blade suspended in the buzzing grain.
That one kills the color green.
And the man with no arms grinned because he already knew the darkness I guarded and
With violent lash fluttering, turned away from those tiny cuts and led me
on to those deeper cuts, blinking in and out of the strange,
thickening haze.
Here, only a few swords floated. These ones take lives, his violet lashes battered.
But unlike the smaller ones and the fat ones, they all appear to be
The same. Sleek.
and long and
Bow like a theft.
but they're not the same at all. Closest
To you is a 10-year sword, that
a
one's
25-year sword, 100 above it, and there a
280.
7-year sword.
And this one? I asked, tentatively reaching for the handle until...
Unchecked, I actually took hold of it.
That's your 50-year sword, he said.
Oddly.
You almost can't see the blade. I added, marveling at the way.
The weapon bit through the air.
The way the finely carved handle.
Bound in a fine fall braid, beaded with winks of pale pearl seemed with every swipe to melt into my palm.
Oh, the man
With no arms chuckled. You can never see the blade. Which I would not understand until I'd returned and found my
blade had dissolved into
breezes and hours.
But will it kill? I wanted to know.
dimly resenting him now that my sword
Hung once again in that
flickering deep.
In half a century. From birth to the...
final second of the 50th year.
Every time?
Most of the time.
This surprised me.
Why most? No weapon is perfect. Whatever this blade passes through, it most certainly will divide. Though there is one thing which can stitch and hold the...
Ooh.
What's that?
Your heart is blacker than will ever be told. But that is why you're
Here.
Beyond him then, I caught sight of still more swords. Though these were...
inconceivably long.
For you, maybe, said the man with no arms.
For me, they are as they are. Some
Mile long.
Some a river long. There is one that is a sky long. They kill lives too.
I suppose. One sword will kill.
A season. One will kill a country. One I'm making now will even kill an idea. An idea, I pondered.
But those are too expensive for you. And his violet lashes seem to
Tremble with delight.
How much? I pressed.
the wielder must die before...
Wielding it.
But I objected.
Yes, it's tricky. Too tricky for you, as I already said. Too expensive.
Then the man with no
Arms led me back among the tiny, wavering swords.
these cost a breath you may never take again. Those a feeling you may never shape again.
Then his lashes quivered daintily. Beware though, as all are double-edged, and come with this warning. Should a wound ever fail,
You,
will vanish.
like the blade.
You wield.
But I didn't care. What about the 50-year sword?
Your sword? His violet lashes twitching.
Slyly.
I could not object.